Hi everyone, welcome to this moment and the Diamond Mothering, presented by Caroline and Lisa. Welcome everyone. We're here to illuminate the core of the feminine force, and Lisa has invited an amazing guest here tonight. And Lisa, would you like to introduce our guest?
Yeah, certainly. Good morning everyone. Morning from Australia, I should say. I know it's not morning anywhere else in the world. This morning I have invited Juli Turner, who I had the good fortune to bump into through mutual connections about a week and a half ago, and I just enjoyed the conversation so much I thought I had to get her onto our feminine first aid. So this live is specifically to help mothers actually do the parenting. So it's giving us a deeper understanding and maybe some things that we can do that can really help us in the moment. And Juli, being a hypnotherapist, a coach and an educator, has a passion in parent-child dynamics. So often what we're experiencing with our children has a lot to do with what we experienced with our parents. So welcome, Juli.
Thank you so much for being here, or for allowing me to be here.
Welcome, Juli.
Welcome.
Welcome, Juli.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I'm just going to add that third component in. Definitely for me here.
It's hard to know what to say, isn't it? Because I often say good morning, they're like, oh, hang on a minute. So we're sort of in this distortion, this time warp, right? So Juli, do you want to start off? And like what I think would be really interesting, because perhaps there are some mothers that haven't explored the parent-child dynamic in depth a lot. But maybe it would be really interesting just to hear your perspective on the significance of that dynamic going back for a mother.
Well, let me start off with, I love how you introduced it and the importance of the parent-child dynamic and the mother-daughter specifically, as well as often, as you alluded to, it starts in our childhood, as the mother, the adult in the situation. And we don't even, we're not very present or aware of that sometimes. Now, how important is it? It is essential that as a parent, as somebody who is a guide for this new individual in the world, to understand themselves before they start teaching another how to move forward into the world. And I think that's something that's really, really missing in the dynamic, is especially, the way that nature works. Often people become a parent when they're barely an adult themselves. The human mind isn't even finished forming until the age of 25. And we're having children before that is not even slightly abnormal. So just the fact that you haven't even become a fully fledged adult, and now you're bringing this other individual into the world. Not that you can't do it, not that there's anything wrong with it. Just be aware of the tools that you're currently working with. Would be amazing if we taught that course.
Wow, yeah, that's something that you don't really think about. And I know for myself, like I didn't really, I guess my conditioning, my programming as a young person was to get married, and I did it all textbook, right? So I got engaged, I got married, then I bought the dog, and then I fell pregnant. And in there somewhere, there was a house that was bought, and it wasn't bad and it wasn't wrong. It was just that I didn't really actually stop to think, is this really what I want? Do I really want to have kids now? And there were other pressures that happened that almost I'd always thought I wouldn't have children until I was about 30, but then something happened and people were saying things, and my husband was saying things. It was like, oh yeah, well, I should, let's just do it now. And so it wasn't really a deliberate, conscious decision. And I think what you said is very true,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and seldom is it. So you're one of many.
Yeah, it's funny actually. Women are having also having children much later in life now as well, and that's another challenge, isn't it? You know, I mean, I've had friends who started to have actually a good few friends actually have had children when they were 40, started having children when they were 40, and then you know finding it difficult, you know, for different reasons. You know, not having the
Mhm.
same type of energy and feeling, you know, finding it hard to kind of, I suppose, you know, intergenerationally, there's a bigger gap between, a longer time since they were that age, I suppose, you know, so that could be like 30
Right.
years since they were a child themselves. And it seems to be kind of like trying to get into that playfulness was harder, you know, that kind of way. So there's a lot of a different kind of dynamic that go on when you're having children at different ages. I had mine from 30. I started at 30 and at 30, 31 and then 32 kind of thing. And I remember actually thinking to myself, I remember thinking, oh, but, you know, it was a little bit different, Lisa, from you, because I was thinking, oh my God, those years that I spent in my career, they were actually meant for childbearing because I'm really tired. I could have done with that energy to, you know, the energy I had 10 years ago, I thought was like, oh, that's what I was supposed to be doing, using that for. I
Yeah.
was supposed to be using it for having kids, you know. So like I was kind of looking at it differently. I was like, oh my God, you know, like I thought at 30, you know, the
Yeah.
sleepless nights and, you know, just the physicality of it. Because I used to be in a really nice job and in an office, and I was sitting down, I was minded very well, and had a really good job in the corporate world, and I was looked after, pampered for those 10 years before I had kids, and it was a bit of a shock to the system.
Yes.
You know, so like I don't know, it's probably different, has a challenge at every kind of decade, you know. It's interesting though, isn't it, to hear, you know, different perspectives at different stages, you know. There's many different facets to mothering, I guess, isn't there?
I thank you so very much for bringing up the energy factor, because this is not a way that I thought I would add value to this conversation, but thank you again, because here's, and we all know this, when we get pregnant, then when we give birth, our hormones are messed with. They're changing, they're shifting, they're morphing, no matter what age we are at. And the thing is that modern medicine just goes, oh, well, that's the way it works. Hormones shift, and you know, you can take a drug if you want to. But the facts, and they are actually facts. I often talk of opinions, but facts are that our hormones don't have to shift and stay in the shifted position. We can actually work with our own hormonal balances to bring that energy level up again. Things like cortisol, where we're all so terrified of cortisol, and chronic release of cortisol is a bad thing. However, cortisol is what gets us up in the morning. We need cortisol. It's very important. So we don't want to like get rid of it all. And there's so many different ways food alone can shift the way our hormones are. However, the average person does not understand that, does not know that. So I am working with a company right now who is shifting, helping man, woman, child shift their hormones through food alone. And then, of course, if you need to, supplementation and that kind of thing. But for those women out there that did have children later, or even if they had children younger and they felt, oh, I have no energy for this, that is a hormonal imbalance. And lack of sleep.
Yeah,
Like let's,
yeah, yeah.
but I mean, lack of sleep leads to hormonal imbalances. So, end of the day, if you actually work on getting your hormone balance back in check, without medication, if at all possible, you will have the energy to be with those kids.
Great. That's a brilliant first aid tip.
Oh yes. Oh yeah, yeah, I think so too. Now I want to get a bit juicy here. let's dive in. We've sort of got a bit juicy, but let's dive in deep. So one of the things that I noticed when I had kids, and I can actually remember sitting at nippers, because in Australia, like most Australian families that are on the beach do nippers, where we take our kids to the beach every Sunday morning and they get taught how to survive in the ocean. And they become lifesavers. They often do voluntary life-saving work. As they become teens, they'll all go down to the beach and they'll all stand there with their little hats on and, you know, and watch the surfers, you know. So this is like a very Australian thing to do on a Sunday morning. not good if you're much of a drinker. I never was, but if you were, there were a lot of really rusty looking dads on the Sunday morning that would turn up, and I would just think, not a good idea. But anyway, Sunday mornings. And I remember once seeing my boys. I have twin boys that are 29 now. And I remember seeing them at the time, and they run through, they do all these activities. They run through the sand, and they call them flags. They pick up flags, and all the kids are really competitive. And there are a lot of parents that were like, go, 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 you know. And I was just sitting back watching. And of course, my boys were just like, they were just so in the moment. They just, you know, they'd be running, and then all of a sudden they'd see something that really interested them. They're like, oh, that looks really interesting, you know. And I just watch them and think, I love that so much. But I was observing the way other parents were reacting to the situation, and I was observing to how I was reacting to the situation. And it was a tough job bringing up twin boys, like really tough. I felt like I survived most of the time. And I remember actually sitting there and having this thought, why did I do this? Why? Just remind me again, like in my mind, why would I want to have kids, you know? And I mean, I love them, and I enjoyed the love and the affection. But there was another part of me that was going, this is just freaking hard work. And I actually came to the resolution that these boys had helped me grow so much. They had helped me really see so much about myself and become a much better person. And I thought, oh, that's why I have kids. And I think this really leads into your expertise, because it's whether you're a young mum or an older mum, your child is going to activate that part of you at that age, probably, that had emotional experiences that weren't resolved. They're going to activate the parts of you that need to be healed, because they're little mirrors, right? And, you know, if they're angry, then perhaps there's some anger in you that hasn't been released. But whatever age you are, the child is going to really press those buttons in you. So perhaps you might want to have a little bit of a chat about that, Julie.
Well, interestingly enough, like where my head went when you started saying, you know, that they teach you, is no matter what the relationship, whether it's parent-child, romantic, work, coworkers, whatever the case may be, humans learn relationally. So we need those mirrors for us to learn. It's all people always talking about, you know, I'm gonna go off, I'm gonna, you know, be by myself and figure these things out. Will never work. It will never work, because then you come back into the relationships and the life that you had, and that reflection is still there. And you're like, oh, I was really good until I had that reflection. So it's just like taking, you know, you go and take a break from your children thinking, oh, that's what I need. I need a break from my children. And then you come back and they're still triggering the same things, because you haven't learned relationally. That's what humans do. So I love that you brought that up. And yes, we all have different experiences that we go through in childhood. And I'll have clients come to me, and I remember this one specific gentleman, and he's like, I think I had trauma in my childhood. And I'm like, I guarantee you did.
Yes.
Like, what do you mean? And I said, childhood is trauma. That's what childhood is. Every time that we learn something new in an extreme way, which everything we learn new as a child is an extreme way, you have trauma, right? So trauma can look like the first time that you had to say the alphabet in kindergarten could be super traumatic to a child, or it could be what we classically think of as trauma, which we hope never happens to a child, but we know does. But understand that when you are triggered by your child, it wasn't necessarily this grand, huge thing. And also understand your child is going to go through that. So when you kind of write off whatever your child has got, like, it's not a big deal, you know, like, you'll be fine, that kind of thing. They're not actually okay at that point. I see parents do that all the time. They just kind of like wipe off something that a child is being quite, you know, upset about. And it's like that's actually teaching the child that their pain doesn't matter. Their pain is not of value. And I'm not saying that any of us should hold on to pain, but let me tell you, they're going to hold on to that pain, because they're going to not have a place to actually work through that pain. So I'm not sure if that actually answers your question, because I think I went off in 3 different segments, but it's just
Yeah,
so important for us to understand, A, that we learn relationally. So it's wonderful to take a break, but you need to understand that when you come back from that break, the problem's still going to be there because you're still the same person and so is your child. B, oh, and something else I forgot to mention. I'm just throwing a whole bunch of stuff out here. Another thing that I hear from parents all the time is, my child is trying to drive me crazy. They do exactly what I asked them not to. They're making you crazy.
yeah.
And it's like, please no, your child is not trying to drive you crazy. Your child is exploring the world like children do. And because it's driving you crazy is actually you, not them. They're going to continue to do these things. And I'm not saying that you should just kind of get over it. Absolutely, you need to work through it. It's still a fact, but please know that your child is not actually out there trying to make you crazy. Children just don't have even the understanding of that at this point. They're just like, they're exploring. They're just
I think actually what I noticed was when I had my kids first, I didn't know anything about spirituality or anything about what people are talking about now, mindfulness, whatever. In later years, I studied that mindfulness and neuroscience, but it was so kind of obvious to me. It's like they just want me to be present, you know. That's when I learned about presence, because like they need me to be in this moment where they are now, because that's where they live. They live in the now, and I just kind of thought to myself, and I you know, that the difficulty is for the parent to come into the now, to be with them in that space, you know, to enjoy it with them. And I think like there's such a rich bond that can be there, and it's enjoyment that can be there, but the pain and the suffering of the parent is the inability to be in the now with them, you know. And that's kind of, I suppose, where you can use it as a tool to kind of awaken yourself, I guess, you know, and you know, to start to realize that maybe it's difficult for you to be in the now. You haven't been trained, or you haven't been, I suppose, like, Julie, do you think that, like, what in your line of work do you see is the kind of the blockages, like, for that relation to happen authentically, or you know, especially when you talk about um, being able to soothe children, you know, what do you think? Is it something, a numbness in the parent to be able to not feel, you know, that actually compassion, you know, that feeling of, you know, when a child or somebody cuts themselves, you kind of, there's something that I think that draws you to that naturally. And I just wonder, you know, in your experience, is there something that people don't have the capacity to feel, that kind of natural um, first aid that kind of seems to come, you know, that come, you want to come to the child's aid?
Well, I think part of it, and you know, again, this is opinion, not fact, is the way that you were raised. Like Lisa was saying, the way that you were raised. If you didn't have somebody come to your rescue, so to speak, or support you the way you needed to, your default is, this needs to end. The other thing is, we kind of take things personally. I don't know if you've read the book, The Four Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz, but that's one of the four agreements, is that don't take things personally. So I find that a lot of parents, if their child is upset, the parent almost takes it like an insult. Like, you have a good life, and why would you be upset, and why would you need more, and why, you know, like the parents like, I'm trying to give you everything I have and you're still not good, so now I'm insulted. That's not a conscious thought process in the parent, but it's a subconscious thought process that this to me means I'm not doing something correctly and I can't tolerate that right now. I'm in this scenario, I'm wrong, and that's not okay. So I need to make you wrong so I can be right, so I can be okay. Again, all this is done subconsciously because we are very seldom present and in that situation, which I love that you said, you know, children live in the present. They absolutely do. Somewhere along the way, we get trained that we need to be worried about the future and regretful about the past. Meanwhile, irrelevant to a child or an adult, but yet that we get hung up on. And you know, that I think is the big problem. Is if you actually took the moment to be mindful, to be where your child is at, and really thought about it. It's like, okay, so this child had a very upsetting day yesterday, and yet today they're splashing in the surf, and they don't even seem to care. They're not carrying that. Meanwhile, I've still got the weight of yesterday, and I'm also worried about tomorrow. Why are you not learning from that child? Right? The child is surviving just fine being present, and you think that it actually is beneficial to you to be split into the 3 different timelines, so to speak. So to me, I think there's 2 things. We don't like being wrong, and a lot of things translate to wrong. And the other thing about humans is we love to wish things were different. We love to wish things were different. We wish our child behaved differently. We wish our spouse behaved differently. We wish the weather was different. We wish everything is wishing it was different. And that's a painful place to be.
Non-acceptance of what is. So true. Well,
that was really good. I really enjoyed listening to that because it's so interesting. Like I can reflect. You probably don't know much about my history, Julie, but I sort of had 3 children, parenting in a very different dynamic to my last child. So in that older dynamic, it's very true. I can remember feeling like I just wasn't good enough because I just couldn't understand why they were doing what they were doing and being what they were doing, being what they were being in the moment, you know. And I used to feel so powerless. Like powerless was my big thing, you know, and I didn't realize then that all of these feelings that I was having, I was actually allocating them to my children or my partner. And I hadn't actually been given any education to really know that there was a different way to be in relationship. And so I was often setting up that, you know, and the dynamic was that, you know, I was very loving and caring, but when something happened that activated me and I felt not good enough, I would unconsciously withdraw the love. And that I was also withdrawing the love from myself when I withdrew it from my kids. And it wasn't deliberate. And like I do see it. I see parents getting frustrated at their kids. And because we're sort of not, we don't have this is these steps, follow these steps when you're in that moment. We don't like, we hope to develop, well, we will develop that now. And this is what's coming into the planet right now. But really, this is not well known at the moment. This, what do we do in those moments? And so, and our default position, like you said, is to just, we're in reaction, we feel not good enough, and that makes us feel hurt. And as soon as we're hurt, we close down, we shut the doors, we withdraw the love. From the child's perspective, they're just having an experience, doing what they're doing, and all of a sudden they feel this, they feel it. The parent doesn't have to say anything. They feel this withdrawal of acceptance and love. And that then sets up a dynamic in them that they have to behave in a certain way in order to get love. And that's how people pleasing is started, you know, which is like such a big thing for women, right? So, you know, this people pleasing behavior, you know, the roots of those sorts of behaviors are in these dynamics that are set up when we're kids. You know, we have to be a certain way so that the love doesn't get withdrawn from us.
Yeah, and I think children either choose to become pleasers or they become kind of rebels and outsiders. So, you know, they're kind of, and both are kind of, I suppose one is kind of trying to break that, the other's just being subservient to it, you know, and then it's the ones that kind of want to speak their truth and, you know, cause that trouble when be like your boys. They were brave, you know, because there's others that just, you know, they suck it up and they just like literally suck it, like you're talking about sucking the life out of them, you know, and they just, they go along for the peaceful life, I guess, you know, which is really burying themselves, like, you know, and sometimes takes decades for that to come out, like into your midlife crisis or something, for that to, you know, come to light. Yeah, Julie.
So what you described, Lisa, so eloquently was how we train that there is conditional love. Unconditional love is no matter what the situation, you are loved. But we teach that. We teach that love is connected to a doing, an act, a behavior, whatever the case may be. And we don't intentionally do that, and we don't even actually mean it. Because of course we love our children unconditionally. We don't stop loving them, but we do stop actively giving them love at these certain points. And the thing is that we don't love ourselves unconditionally. So back to, what a mother can do to make sure that she's supporting her child in the best way possible, to learn unconditional love for herself, because she can't give it to anybody else if she doesn't have it for herself. So if she actually realizes that whether she's late for work or not, whether she is, whether no matter what she shows up as, if she's okay with it, if she's like, okay, that's just today. It's just today. I still love me. I still think I'm amazing. Like, how many women out there behave that way? Very few. And it's so, so important. And it's actually something that we all deserve and need. That's like you were saying, Caroline, you're either the people pleaser, the rebel, or the controller.
Yeah.
Those are the things. And rebels often can be mismanaged as controllers, but you're correct. A lot of women, I would argue a lot of men, are in the same place, that they have this fear if they do not behave or bring whatever it is to the table that's your expectation, they're going to lose. Not conscious, subconscious, and that's how we get into these messes of
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because it's actually back to attachment styles, they call in psychology, don't they? So your attachment styles as a child. I did a kind of an interview with Grania Kane, and she's a social scientist in Ireland here, and she was talking about that, and and how that shows up in relationships as well. In your marriage, it never changes that dynamic, your attachment style. So it's amazing how to become aware of that even yourself is hugely beneficial information, about your own self-knowledge, isn't it?
Well, and there is a school of thought that because again we're relational, that your attachment style does shift. And I'm not saying that you were raised with an anxious attachment style, or you were groomed into an anxious attachment style, that you would ever be avoidant conclusively. But, anxious, avoidant, or secure, whatever your partner may or may not be, will actually shift how you show up in the relationship. So if you are, mildly anxious or even secure, and your partner is avoidant, it can bring out some of the insecurities and the anxious that maybe didn't show up in the last relationship. And it does morph and change, but we, left to our own devices, tend to find partners that allow us to be exactly what we were groomed to be.
Yes. So interesting.
Groomed to be.
I was just actually reminding me of something too, of what I've seen, and I've seen it in my own family dynamics. Sort of my first family with my older children, how one child, and I see this in a lot of families, one child can really activate the parent. It's almost like from me observing, I could go, oh, I can see that child actually has all of your qualities, and the parent is just like, that child is the least favorite, and like they wouldn't say that, but the way they treat that child, it comes out in their tolerance and their patience of that child. And they often, even recently, I have a friend that's talking about his grown son, and he's like saying, and he's this and he's that, and I'm thinking, that's what you are, like, I'm just like, do you know what I mean? Like, can't see the relationship between the things that aggravate him in that child and himself.
Right.
Yeah,
again
it's so
here.
happens, doesn't it? I've seen that so many times as well within families. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually, as soon as you started saying that, I knew which role my family had always been, that's for sure.
Yeah, I know it's interesting, and that awareness, isn't it? So really, I guess the solution to all of this is the awareness of. For me, it was the awareness of how I was feeling. So if I
Mm,
was feeling powerless, I realized that I was in a dynamic that was unconscious, that I had set
Mm,
up, that wasn't real. And so
mm,
my paying attention to my feelings was what allowed me to go, oh, why am I feeling frustrated here? Or why am I feeling powerless? Or,
mm,
like, and then that would bring on this, like, this looking inwards and going, oh, is that, and I was getting
mm,
curious about what was going on in me, and
mm,
taking that space, like,
mm,
because often the behaviors that confronted me, um, could very well have, and they did earlier on, activating me quite a lot of resistance and a lot of,
mm,
and
mm,
frustration, and even I wasn't really much of a yeller, but like I was angry,
mm, mm.
and just for me to be able to have enough self-love, really,
Yeah.
to just stop for a minute and reflect on, why am I feeling this? Because it is about self-love,
it is.
because isn't it?
Yes,
Unconditional.
self-mothering.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
unconditional. And well, thank you for mentioning self-mothering. Um, a long time ago, I started realizing that what we do is we parent ourselves.
Mm,
There's that voice in the head, in our head. I always say I have multiple voices in my head. I have a lunatic and I have a logic, and lunatic is a lot of fun, and I do tend to go with lunatic, but then there's logic as well, and we're the third party that's viewing this,
yeah.
and that's not my analogy. That's from Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, amazing book. uh, but we self-parent, and a lot of the time I'll work with a client and they'll tell me, oh, I knew that I had to do this, and I knew that. I'm like, whose voice is that? Where did you know this from? How did you learn this? And they'll be like, and often it's a parent or a grandparent, or like generally
Mm,
that kind of thing.
Mm,
But sometimes it's the lack of the
mm,
discipline they had, so they became their own parent. Either
mm,
way, they're
mm,
self-parenting and they're not doing a good job.
mm.
It is not born of unconditional love. So when you say self-love, I want to reiterate that saying I love myself and I'm going to go get a manicure is not self-love.
Mm,
mm.
Self-love is, no matter how you show up that day, you are still aware you're valued and you're amazing.
Mm,
yeah.
mm,
Yeah, I love that.
mm,
Actually, I love actually what Lisa was saying as well, about emotions. I think, about what we're trying to create here with the feminine first stage and the feminine force field. It's like, simplifying all that, because when we hear about, attachment styles and, you know, our past, conditioning, and we hear about, the multi-generational trauma and everything, it is very complicated to kind of field, but when you have the practice of kind of, using your emotions as signposts to your to coming back to yourself, and becoming self-aware, when you're using that moment as a moment of growth, and that you can release a lot of that in the present moment through your emotional education and awareness, and it
mm,
just begins to dissolve those patterns and those difficult conflicts within the home, and all of those kind of, I suppose, your I suppose patterns that are passed on to you through your parents, whatever. All that can be simplified, when you actually stop running from your emotions and start to
mm,
become aware and accept them and embrace them in the moment, because all of that is actually happening here and now in the activation with your child. So that's why it's so key, and it's gold, and it's really kind of
mm,
that diamond moment, that we can really transform, have the opportunity in the moment to transform ourselves into kind of that gold. Because when I hear, it's funny actually, when I talked about creativity last night, because when you kind of are looking, or you're not in the moment, you're not actually, I would say golden moments, I like to say as well, because like a golden moment, if you're present, you're creating gold, you're creating richness in this moment, because your projection of the future is totally illusionary. So if you could be sitting in the moment, if you can be sitting, you can be sitting in a moment with your 5-year-old worried about his college education. And when you're sitting in that state, you're actually creating that fearful future for him if you're going to be continuing on that kind of vein of thought. But if you're in that moment and it's a golden moment, you're actually creating a golden future for your child, you know, because you're present with him, and the actual presence that you're giving to him is golden, and it creates a richness that's beyond like anything else that it can ever give anybody, you know. It's just the gold of life, you know. It just has that amazing quality, and that just will go through the generations and heal the generations as well, you know. It has a power to heal transpersonal, and you know, that line, you know, it has massive power, really has. And that's why I suppose we have this golden ring that we use within the branding, because it's the intergenerational mother ring that we're kind of trying to heal as well, because when you really come into that presence, we have that power, that feminine force.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And,
Yeah.
and that moment, it's true, Carolyn. I just want to add to that too, that the reason that is so gold is because the mother also has the opportunity to feel what she's feeling and be with it. And when you be with it, you can actually integrate it. So it's not controlling your life anymore. It's not driving you unconsciously. You're becoming aware of this feeling, and you're able to have a moment to just acknowledge, you know, like for me, the biggest healing that I'm getting at the moment is when my teenager and I have conversations, and sometimes these feelings are activated in me and I feel powerless, and my capacity to sit there and go, oh, when you said that, wow, I just got a real big wave of powerlessness then, you know, and that makes me feel, and you know, and I'm describing to her how that landed on me, and what the feelings came up, and she has the opportunity then to say, oh yeah, I can see why that made you feel that, mum. So she's also seeing me regulate my own emotions and work through my own emotions, which is giving her a skill. So I couldn't do that if I had a reaction of powerlessness, went into my head and thought, oh my God, how am I going to fix this? What can I do about this? I've got to try and control this. I would have missed all of that.
Yeah.
You know?
I love that. I love that you're able to do that with your daughter, because you are walking your talk. Exactly what you lovely ladies want to do and support moms to be able to do is exactly what you were just talking about. And it's as simple as that. Just be aware and share and walk through it with them so that they understand that that's what they can do and need to do as well. Now, something that comes up every time you say the word powerless. There's a book, and I hope I could swear because the book title has a swear in it. Stop Doing That Shit is what the name of the book is. And I believe that the gentleman's name is Gary Bishop. And I like to mention books and stuff like that because I don't want to pretend that these ideas came out of my own awareness. Give credit where credit is due. So he talks about the 3 things that get in our way. And one of them is the way we perceive ourselves, the way we perceive others, and the way we perceive the world. So you in your past, and possibly jumps into your present once in a while, perceived yourself as powerless. And you know, for me, I can speak to myself because of course I know mine, I don't know yours, but I always thought I wasn't smart enough. I always thought people don't care and the world is lonely. Well, let me tell you, with those thought processes running in the back of your mind, they are true. They are true to you. But I have never felt powerless in my life. So how could you feel powerless? Because it's not true for me. Right? So if we share and actually talk about these things, it's like, oh, that would explain the dynamic over here and how this happens and that kind of thing. So again, communication, sharing, being open, transparency, all those things take all the, oh my goodness, I have to learn attachment styles and I have to learn psychology and I have to, no, it's actually way simpler than that. But sometimes you need to go see somebody else or take a course like this or whatever the case may be to be able to break down your own barriers enough to communicate. That's kind of
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
Yes, we're all about trying to make it easier for mums, you know.
Well, it's natural, isn't it? Like that intuitive way is natural. It's our natural state to be in a flow and to be intuitive. And our culture has trained it out of us. And even to the point where, like, I didn't even used to value my own capacity to be in that intuitive flow. Like, I didn't value my own feminine force. So, you know, like, and this is what needs, I feel anyway, really we need to start uncovering now and bringing back into our lives, because there are so many influences that are so big and so influential, especially on our girls, that if we don't have access to the feminine force, we don't have access to a greater intelligence. We don't have access to solutions that are beyond this paradigm. You know, and that's what Einstein said, that you've got to find the solution in a different consciousness to the one in which the problem was created. And at the moment, we're all trying to fix what's not working. But the best solution is actually to move into a place where it works. It's much simpler.
Isn't that the truth? That's a beautiful sentence. Hope
That's
everybody
it.
heard.
It is. It's a window to creativity, you know, because we have to understand, like, our minds are, you know, we only have the information. We can only use the information that we have at hand, you know, and in our perception, you know. So, like, the only way to kind of really gain, like, geniuses are are born from insight, you know, from actually training yourself to always work from insight. And there's actually there's a fine art to that. But once you kind of learn how to open that window into the world of insight, and then you become very, very discerning around the voices that you're talking about, Julie, you know, and knowing what's true and what's not true. And eventually they disappear completely. And then you end up just having the voice of inspiration, and then you have an inspired life, because you're always acting from that. So it's not that you're always going to have the voices. If you continue down the path of training yourself in that regard, you have a flow of inspiration that is available to you all the time. So that's where we would love to get children to, you know. So the only way we can do that is through the environment that's created in the home setting, you know, and hopefully we could in schools, but home is the most important. But the education is not available as much as we'd love it to be. And that's why we're here to try and bring that new enlightened understanding around mothering to the women of the world.
That's beautiful. I love that.
So, Julie, just to finish up, and to put you on the hot seat for the last couple of minutes, if you had one piece of critical advice that you would love to offer mums, and I mean, obviously, it would probably apply to everyone, but given we talk to mums mostly, do you have one thing that you can think of that, you know, maybe from your experiences you've gone, wow, if mums could know that, that probably would have made a big difference for them?
Just the simple sentence, stop wishing things were different. Stop wishing things were different. Don't wish your child behaved differently. Don't wish that you were in a different city. Stop wishing things were different so you can accept what's in front of you, so it doesn't cause you pain. Just being aware that exactly what's in front of you is what's meant to be in front of you at that moment.
Oh yeah, I love that. That's gold. That is gold.
Absolutely.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Julie. If you'd like to know more about Julie, we've got some information in underneath the video you can see, so you can connect with her. Carolyn and I have 2 more sessions left of the Birthing the Diamond Mothering coming up, and the next one is Uncovering the Diamond in the Rough. So the first one is available for replay, and you can register now in the link underneath as well. And we would love to see you. To hear more, these are free webinars. All you've got to do is show up. We're going to foot the bill, and we're excited. We sort of think of it like a date, you know, Julie. We've been like, let's go on a date with these mums.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so that's coming up. So make sure you register, and keep an eye out for these lives. Every morning we're doing something different. Next week, we're going to have a real life mother on feminine first aid, and we're actually she's going to come on anonymously. This is so cool, Julie. She's going to come on anonymously and share her challenges with her teenage daughter. And we're going to bring the feminine force field in and work the situation to help her come to some sort of a resolution. So we're like super excited about this first aid.
I love that. Wonderful. Thank you guys so much for having me here today. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Julie. It's been amazing to meet you. So it's just been a fabulous connection, and stay in touch. And you're in the ring now, so
yes,
we're so happy to have you here with us. But we're delighted. We'll be back tomorrow night with our little story. Isn't that right? It's your term this time.
Yep.
And
My
then
turn for a story.
We have the feminine force field back on Wednesday. We have a really amazing guest on Wednesday night. We have Alison Canavan, who's actually, you know, we coined this phrase here as well, but the supermodeling mother, you know, and she is actually an ex-supermodel. So she's coming on. She's from Dublin, from Ireland, but she moved to the US, and now she's in mindfulness as well. So she's coming in to talk to us on Wednesday night. So we're really excited about that. So stay tuned. Lots of exciting things coming from the Diamond Mothering. And we hope to see you all there on Thursday night for our second date. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.